Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we have a returning guest, and also, by the way, returning company that is one of the, I'll just use the term the OG folks on the show here. So, what we have this week, we're going to be talking about VMware migrations, right? Because of the VMware Broadcom acquisition, VMware is in the news a lot, and it's something that's been a topic on the podcast a number of times as well. So we wanted to really go out and kind of talk about this a little bit. And so to do that, we have today's guest, Madhura Maskasky, Chief Product Officer at Platform 9. And Madhura, it's been 7 years, I think, since we've had you on the show previously. Is that somewhere around there, if that's correct?
That's
So
right.
welcome to
Yeah.
the show. Welcome to the show.
No, thank you.
So
Thank you for
first of
having me.
all, yes, absolutely. And for those that aren't familiar with you, if you don't mind, give everyone a little background, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Really happy to be here, Aaron. I still remember 7 years ago when I had my first session. You also had a session with my co-founder Suresh. But so I'm Madhura Maskasky, head of product, chief product officer at Platform 9 now. But prior to this, I spent almost 8+ years at VMware. That's where me and my co-founders first met, and across the three of us, we have multiple decades of VMware experience, right? So really working with large-scale enterprises. We were some of the key engineers that built VMware's vCloud Director, which is, it's a foundation for the VMware Cloud Foundation Suite, or what is called Cloud Foundation Suite today, right? So lots of deep infrastructure, VMware enterprise expertise, and that kind of brings us to today at Platform 9, where a lot of VMware customers are looking for an alternate destination, right? So it's sort of an interesting circle, feels like a very interesting moment for the company as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, our topic today is VMware migrations. And the reason why we wanted to have you all back was there was a press release you sent out a couple of weeks ago, if I remember correctly, and it really caught my eye. There's a link in the show notes, by the way, around large scale migrations. And as we've documented kind of on the podcast a number of times, there's a VMware and the customers are kind of in a state of flux right now. So we have this point in time moment in the industry where many are evaluating whether they should stay or they should go, right? And so when you speak to customers about this, what should they consider first of all?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the VMware migration is a hot topic today. We came out with an article because there have been a lot of sort of content circulating lately about this topic, right? It's a very key consideration for a lot of enterprises because after Broadcom acquisition, many of them, and we're talking about multiple very large, popular, well-known brands, right? Many of them are looking for an alternate home, an alternate destination. And the biggest challenge that first comes in front of them is there any form of tooling that will really simplify this migration process for us, right? And there has been content that's been coming out. There was a Gartner report, for example, that came out that talked about just how expensive and time consuming these migrations can be. The report, I remember, mentioned that migrations at scale could take months to years and could cost anywhere between 300 to 3,000 plus dollars per VM, right? And when I look at that, I mean that's just that just crazy, right? If I were sitting in the shoes of a CIO or an exec at an enterprise, really evaluating this migration effort, if the migration itself is going to cost me that much, I don't think I can make that ROI really work in my favor. So it would kind of puts people in a conundrum, and that's really what we're here to solve, right? So Platform 9 built vJailbreak, which is an open source VM migration tool. We believe it is the best migration tool that's out there in the industry today because we're able to migrate virtual machines at scale, multiple thousands, multiple tens of thousands in weeks to months and at tenth of the cost, right? So
Nice.
the only thing I want to say to that is, Aaron, there are tools like vJailbreak that are out there, and this problem really can be tamed if it is, properly thought through and orchestrated.
No, I like that, and that's a concept I definitely want to dig into. But let me also ask before we dig into kind of the technical side of all of this. Um, I think in general, what we can't kind of keep hearing, but it's funny because there's never anything official from like the VMware Broadcom, machine, if you will. But we keep hearing things like, oh, there's no 1 year renewals, it's only 3 year renewals, or ESX is gone and it's only vCloud Director. And a lot of times if there is a renewal on the table, it's at a pretty significant premium over the past, like a 3x, 5x. We've even seen in the industry reports of 10x price increases. And so what are you seeing, first of all? And where I'm going with that is this kind of a limited window of opportunity of there's a lot of customers at a decision point now, and then they potentially say, either have to make a decision to move off and they have a certain amount of time to move off, or is it like, okay, you're signing up and you're signing up for another 3 years? So how do you approach it if you're a business owner, first of
Yeah, no, absolutely. And first of all, from what we're seeing, right, it's consistent with what you shared, and we're seeing we're seeing sort of this forcing to renew customers for 3 years only, the 1 year option not being there, right? Typical price increase of 5x at the minimum is what we've seen. And yes, we have seen the 10x's as well. So it's been just a very, very significant price increase to a point where it just does not fit budget for many companies, right? And a time period within which they have to make these renewal decisions. So I think all of this is leading to sort of the nature in which this opportunity is getting structured. I do think it is a time-bound opportunity. I don't think, though, that it is over the next few months. It's going to be out there and existing for at least next few years, right? For vendors such as us and others to potentially participate in and benefit from, because we're also seeing enterprises saying, okay, we're going to try to renew for as few licenses as possible for this either 3 year contract, or some cases, if they're big enough, they're able to negotiate 1 year renewal. So they will keep VMware for that period of time, but they're still very much committed to replacement still. So there are companies we are talking to that are only going to kick off actual replacement project in a year from now, but they're still working with us right now. So it's going to be a multi-year sort of opportunity. And over the next 2 to 3 years, I think one or two players will emerge as the dominant players that took lion's share of that market. And we think we're going to be one of those.
Fantastic. Thank you, Madhura. And let me also maybe combine these together for a second, because as we mentioned, there's really two sides of this. There's the business side and there's a tech side. And back in the day, I helped customers transition from physical servers to virtualization, primarily with VMware. And honestly, that transition was relatively easy. Because at the end of the day, you really worked with the customers, you built an ROI, and you had your total cost of acquisition, and a lot of times the ROI outweighed the TCA extremely quickly, and the financials made great sense. And then there wasn't a huge technical hurdle because you had P2V tools. Right. And so like I remember I did lots and lots of plate spin conversions way back in the day to kind of, throw back to the old days. Right. But
Yep.
I see this potentially being a lot harder, at least on the technical side, because while it's possible to build a business case, I think those prices you were talking about with Gartner, even though they might seem a little high, there's a certain amount of technical lock-in that has to be overcome with all of this. And the hypervisor technology, as well as the virtual networking and all of the other tools, and this rebuilding of years worth of virtual networking, storage networks, etc.
Yeah.
I'm sure you get that, and it's like the number one objection is status quo, right? So how do you overcome that, Madhura?
Yeah, so we've taken a very sort of methodical, structured approach towards it, right? And I think some of the things we've done not just recently, but over past, 7+ years have really helped us there. Because you're absolutely right. Like when I still remember when VMware came out with P2V, right? That was a game changer in terms of how effectively they could start migrating physical customers to virtual, right? But the problem now is at a much broader scale because we're not talking about one or two or three VMs. We're talking about your entire virtualized data center, essentially, and that includes storage, networking, everything. So it's not sufficient to just have a migration tool that knows how to live migrate your virtual machines from, say, ESX to KVM, because that is not going to take into account all of these other aspects. Right. So what helps really Platform 9 and our virtualization product is called Private Cloud Director, right? vGelBreak is our migration tool. But what really helps us really, kind of methodically address these opportunities is the first thing is we've kind of worked over past 7+ years to build a drop-in replacement for every single enterprise feature that's been out there in VMware. Right. And we know and understand those features extremely well. And we invested that effort in those replacement being, exactly same or similar to relate to understand, and etc. So that has to be there. If that's not there, then you can't really migrate from A to B, from VMware to your destination without losing some of that. So now that you have that, then let's say, you're working with a large enterprise, and we recently contracted with one. They're going to migrate 40,000 VMs using vGelBreak to Private Cloud Director. Then you still have to have, human engagement. We have our partner teams, our professional services, our solution architects teams involved, and then they can break down the scope into multiple data centers, multiple clusters, multiple thousands, batches of thousands of VMs, right? And then they kick off the effort to migrate them few hundred VMs at a time. But before they do that, they've kind of laid out their storage, their networking constructs in Private Cloud Director before, right? To match what they have in VMware. And then, then you just watch those migrations, and Aaron, I tell you, they're just beautiful. Like those VMs, from here to there, they just pop, they show up. Everything else remains the same. The IP is the same. And they continue working with all of the services, and the customers just love it. So
Nice.
it's like this twofold approach.
Yes, very nice. And so let me ask you something else too that I was just thinking of too when it goes back to like those previous shows, 7, sometimes even 10 years ago. Platform 9 originally was, as you mentioned, private cloud. Back when private cloud was um, I'll say pre-public cloud, right? And everyone was like, "Oh, do I do public cloud or do private cloud?" And I think over the years the
Yeah.
answers have kind of blended together, right? And so help everyone a little bit too with that evolution of like what is the state of private cloud today, if you will, and what does that mean? Does that still mean like everything is on-prem? Does that mean like there's a SaaS portion of this? Like, how has the technology evolved in the last, number of years? And I have a follow-up, but I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. We were at VMware when Paul Meritz actually first time, I think, coined the private cloud term, and that was to counter the to AWS's new creation back then of public cloud, right? And that was back in 2006 plus or so. And so VMware really pioneered that term and that concept, and was meant to be you have the same sort of the more cloud native or simplified APIs and automation that you use in the public cloud that allows self-service or developers to provision workloads without having to submit a ticket or request to admins, right? So a lot more self-service and automation, but still using your private infrastructure, which may be in one data center or multiple data centers. So really abstracting away the infrastructure from that provisioning interface and the end user from the admin, right? And so that is still the private cloud of today, right? And with, Broadcom again acquiring VMware, if you listen to some of the recent, Hawk 10 announcements and conversations, there's also a new emphasis on private cloud, right? So I think the industry as a whole is re-embracing private clouds. I think GPUs are going to add to that. It's a separate tangent, but we can talk about that. But what we pioneered when we first came out with Platform 9 is, hey, you can take those benefits of private cloud to the next level by having your management software SaaS hosted. And we still provide that as an option for Private Cloud Director, which is our private cloud management platform. You can self-host it, and some enterprises need that, but you can SaaS host it. And that way you are even closer to operating your private cloud like a public cloud, because even the management software, you don't need to install it, babysit it, upgrade it. You just consume it.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that that's such an important distinction because I think too many people, when they hear private cloud, they do tend to think of like the old definition, if you will, way back when, of like, okay, it is absolutely on-prem resources, but then also managed on-prem. And then, oh, because it's managed on-prem, you're responsible for everything. And I think a lot of folks, have started to not shift their mindset, but certainly reevaluate, is that appropriate going forward? Now, let me ask you another kind of evolving technology question. How does the rise of containers and Kubernetes fit into all of this? Because actually, the last time we spoke was when there was something called Project Fission, which was kind of Kubernetes based with Platform 9 way back in the day. And so tell me a little bit about, there's of course VMware and their direction with Tanzu and that entire part of the portfolio. And how have you kind of embraced that, and how do you think about all of that going forward as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we really embraced that Platform 9 Kubernetes since 2017, right? I think that was some of the last time we spoke. And it has continued to be sort of a key pillar of our platform. And even today with Private Cloud Director, you have virtualized clusters similar to your VMware vSphere clusters, and you have Kubernetes clusters. And you can create Kubernetes clusters using VMs, and there's complete integration end to end, right, for the orchestration of the whole thing. Or you can create Kubernetes clusters with just bare metal servers. And so I think that these are going to be two sort of building blocks for any kind of private cloud, because there is a portion of workloads that are becoming cloud native, that are getting migrated to containers. And even with all of these VMware migration conversations that we've been having, or projects that we've been working on, there has always been a Kubernetes component. In some cases, it's very small and it's more of a future thing. In other cases, it's almost 50-50. So I think that's very much going to be, and it's going to continue to be, a sort of a key pillar of a private data center or private cloud story.
Fantastic. And last topic I wanted to touch on before we close out is the subject of operations, because we've been talking a lot about, I'll use the term, up to day zero kind of approach of, hey, I want to do a migration. I'm going to do a bunch of conversions, and maybe I'm going to convert hundreds to thousands of virtual machines over. But what happens, a month from now, or 6 months from now, or a year from now? And so my immediate thought just kind of goes, well, there's going to be a bunch of new platforms. Those new platforms are going to need new tools, new constructs, maybe new APIs. And historically, VMware installs, they're just super sticky. And that's for many different reasons. Of course, the technology, but also, there's many engineers out there and many architects out there that maybe carry a large number of certifications, and they have a lot of money and time invested in just the skills and expertise. And so how do you talk to customers through this and through that challenge when it comes to almost like a reskilling of the organization as well?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. That has been one of the biggest reasons, I think, behind the multi-decade stickiness of VMware, right? Because once you acquire as an administrator all of these, virtualization VMware skills, it's something that there wasn't a strong enough reason in the past to find a replacement for. Now there definitely is, because if your price increase is happening 5 to 10x, you're not viable, as an infra BU inside your company if you don't do something about it, right? And so we really believe that KVM is going to emerge as a new superpower and new standard for virtualization. It's already been a standard for virtualization in public clouds, if you think about it, right? Almost all of the public clouds, entire AWS is powered, and Google is powered by KVM, but it's going to become the new superpower in private data centers as well. And KVM is beyond Platform 9, right? So I think what's going to happen is there is going to be sort of an equivalent skill set on operating KVM hypervisors, operating open source hypervisors or private clouds, that's going to start emerging. People are going to get a lot more conversant and comfortable, especially these VMware administrators, with the equivalent ways of doing things. And if you think about it, hypervisors have been completely commoditized now for a while, right? Meaning every single capability exists at KVM level. It's just about understanding it, operationalizing it. And that's really going to happen. And we're seeing that, right? I mean, one of the first things we do as part of our, it could be a pitch session or some of the introductory sessions. We just come out with a map of, hey, here are your favorite 15 VMware features you love. And here is their equivalent in the KVM world. And here's the equivalent in the private cloud director world. So really, that's, I think, going to be the common factor.
Fantastic. That's super great. Well, I think with that, we'll close it out right there. So, Madhura, for folks that are out there that are interested in this, where can listeners go for more information?
Absolutely. So, platform9.com is the best place. You will find all kinds of information on Private Cloud Director, which is our virtualization stack. Go to the docs there where you can find a lot more technical details. And then vJailbreak is available on GitHub. So if you just search for GitHub on GitHub for vJailbreak, you'll find more info. And then contact us, contact Platform9 for any more details.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. And I certainly appreciate your time this week. And for everyone out there, we certainly appreciate your time as well. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend. Please leave us a review. And on behalf of Brian and myself for this week, thank you everyone for listening. And we'll talk to everyone next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron.